Good afternoon and welcome to the Catalan Cymru revision sessions. This session will focus on history and the Unit 1 essay, and will be presented by me, Andrew Morel, from Untitled Chapter, Llanidloes High School. The session will last around 45 minutes, where I'll go through some of the relevant content, and if you've got any questions, please use the question and answer function in the top right-hand side of the screen, and I'll endeavour to answer any of your questions at the end of the session. The session will be recorded, and the resources that I use today, along with the recording, will be uploaded on the e-sgol website in the Catalan Cymru area. So welcome back to the last of our 4 sessions. Well done for sticking with it. Well done for taking the time out of your day to do it, and I hope they're proving useful and beneficial to you. So in our previous sessions, what we've done in the first one was we looked at Unit 2, Question 1 and how to master it. Then our second session, we again looked at Unit 2, but Question 2 this time, the interpretation-based question and how to master it. Last session, last Thursday, then we looked at how to manage the content and focusing on the concepts in Unit 1. And then today we're going to be looking at Unit 1, essay writing skills and developing reasoned arguments is the idea. Now, all the recordings for these sessions are up on the Catalan Cymru website. So if you've missed one or you want to go back and rewatch part of it or even all of it, then they are there on the Catalan Cymru website for you to find. So just Google Catalan Cymru, you can see it in the bottom right-hand corner, and up it will pop. So just a reminder, right, I know I covered this last time, but just a reminder that Unit 1 covers all 8 of these different period studies, right? So if you're doing any one of these 8 studies, then you will be, well, this is perfect for you, okay? Now, I teach Europe in the Age of Conflict and Cooperation, so that's where my interest, where my more expertise lie. But nonetheless, this will be relevant and useful to anyone studying these other topics because we are focusing on the skills. And we're not doing content, we're focusing on the skills that's going to help you with the assessment. So either one you're doing, or any one you're doing, I should say, then this will help you. So we're going to jump straight in, and we're going to start by thinking about where do marks come from. Well, marks come from what are called band characteristics. This is what examiners have when they mark your essays and give you a grade. And the biggest struggle is often to get out of band 3. And band 3 is equivalent to 11 or between 11 and 15 marks out of 30. I often find this that to get out of band 3 is almost a bigger step than to get between band 4, band 5 and band 6. So what does it mean, right? Well, band 3 characteristics mean this, right? Initially, it tells you the response has some focus on the key issues set and begins to discuss these to come to judgment on the question set. So what this means is that you do discuss the question set, but you probably don't cover the whole time period that that question is focused on. Secondly, the response is usually restricted to a for and against discussion with some evidence of listing and unloading of notes. So there is very limited analysis, right? You've got on the one hand, on the other hand, however, right? But it's a for and against. It's not a true discussion and debate. There may well be some considerable drift, and there may well be a mechanistic tone to the response. When it sounds like unloading of notes, it means it sounds like a story. Whilst when it talks about there's drift, the answer isn't mainly focused on the concept in the question. So there are some positives, right? In order to get 15 out of 30 marks, there are definitely some positives, but they aren't good enough to be those higher bands. Usually, roughly, you're talking 18 marks for a B, 20, 21 marks for an A, just as an idea. Now, that changes year to year, and in fact, it changes between which option you do as well, but nonetheless, that's roughly how it is, okay? Now, what you really are aiming for then is you're aiming obviously for 30 out of 30, right? And 30 out of 30 comes from band 6 characteristics. Now, band 6 characteristics are the following. The response is fully focused on the exact key concept in the question, covering the whole of the set period, with a clear and convincing debate on the main developments and reaching a substantiated judgment in a lucid and fully coherent essay. Now that is probably quite a handful to get around or get into your head, right? So we'll look at that today. We'll kind of break it down and we're going to cover each element at a time. Now, we'll just compare that briefly to Band 5. So Band 5 being 21 to 26 marks, right? Band 5 says the response is mainly rather than fully. So I'll tell you what I'll do. Very briefly, I'll highlight the keywords. Apologies. Highlight the keywords, right? I need the highlighter, not the pen. So this says fully focused, that says mainly focused. On debating the key concept, right? This talks about the exact key concept. Covering most or all of the set period here. Band 6 is the whole of the period. Band 5 is most or all of the period. The response considers most of the main developments, providing convincing debate, and is able to come to a supported and balanced and appropriate judgment. So this talks about most of the main developments. This says the main developments. So you'll have correctly identified what the main developments were. Convincing debate, that's along the lines of fully lucid and fully coherent, but it's just another step up. And then this doesn't have substantiated. Substantiated being evidenced. If you substantiate your claim, you evidence your claim. So what we'll do is we today are going to go through each of these bits and we're going to see how is it we can try, right? How can we try and reach those top marks? Because actually, even if we don't reach those top marks, even if we don't reach Band 6, then we are probably still reaching Band 5, aren't we, right? Even if it's not fully focused, it'll probably be mainly focused. Even if it doesn't cover all of the main developments, it'll probably cover most of the main developments. Yeah, see what I mean? So, how do we ensure that the answer is fully focused on the exact key concept? The first bit talks about the exact key concept, doesn't it? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to spot the historical concept in the question, a kind of continued version of last week's session. So all the questions set for Unit 1 expect you to engage with a debate over an historical concept. A debate is a back and forth discussion. It's not a I state my point, they state their point, we conclude and we move on. A debate is a full and frank discussion back and forth where you address the other ideas on the other side. You come back at them with new evidence. So to do this effectively, you need to become skilled at spotting the concept and the evaluation that question requires, the specific thing that question requires. Not the one that you want to answer, but the one that question requires. And this is vitally important to you to ensure that you answer the question set. Now, I've put this in capital letters because, as I've said here, it is the key thing that usually lets students down. Not answering the question that is set. Answering one that you want to answer, or one that's a bit similar to one that you've done previously in school or college. And this is, frankly, right, only natural. If you think about it, you've been learning content for subjects since year 10, right, at a minimum, but writing a 30-mark essay is something you did 6 months ago, tops. So it's not unsurprising that you aren't focusing on the exact question, right, and so sitting in Band 3, 11 to 15 marks. It isn't surprising. And you'll find now as you really hone your revision into these exams, right? Remembering a Unit 1 exam is before May half term. As you hone these exams, what you're doing is you are going to practice this technique and you are going to be able to get the evidence in your head that allows you to debate, that gives you evidence in your head that sees it from more than one perspective or point of view. So what we're going to do is we are going to have a look at a past paper, right? So this past paper comes from Unit 1, Europe in the, or Period Study 8, Europe in the Age of Conflict and Cooperation, 1890 to 1991. Now, just a brief step aside here for a moment to remind you of what I showed you at the end of the last session was the individual sections of each period study that the exam board has said will not be examined in this year's exam. So, for example, for Period Study 8, Europe in the Age of Conflict and Cooperation, that is Germany. So the question I've got here, which is from a past paper that the exam board had produced, it wouldn't be asked because it's about Germany. But nonetheless, we can still use it to help spot the key concepts and things like that. So just as a bit of a pointer, it'll tell you to answer one question in section A and one question in section B. So you've got a choice, right? Unlike Unit 2, where there's no choice, Unit 1, there is a choice. So that does allow you maybe to follow something that you're feeling more comfortable with, or indeed, if there's a certain word in a question you don't understand or don't quite know what it means or what it's asking for, you can flip to the other question then, can't you? And hopefully that'll give you greater security and confidence as you're going ahead to answer that question. So for example here, right, section A might say, how successful were attempts to reduce tensions in Europe in the period 1919 to 1938? Section B, to what extent were economic challenges the most serious problems facing Germany in the period 1918 to 1945? While section B answers, the lives of people of Russia were affected more by repression than any other government action in the period 1905 to 1945, discuss. And how far do you agree that the Cold War was mainly responsible for changing relations in Europe in the period 1945 to 1991? Now, the main difference between these sections, other than just being a choice, is that section A tends to be a shorter time period. Sorry, I was pressing the rub out button as well then. And section B tends to be a longer time period. So just bear that in mind, right? That you have to cover a longer time period, almost certainly in section B. So, when you get an essay question, you need to identify two things. You need to identify what the factor in the question is and what the key concept is in which you will debate about to reach an evaluation. So we'll start with the first question, and then I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean about the difference between a factor and the key concept. So this question from option 1, the Tudors, is the threat posed by the nobility was the main challenge facing Henry VII in establishing the Tudor dynasty in the period 1485 to 1509. So the factor in this question is the threat of the nobility, whilst the key concept is the main challenge facing Henry VIII in establishing the Tudor dynasty. Now, what I mean here is that you are going to, throughout your essay, you're going to debate the challenges that Henry VII faced in establishing the Tudor dynasty. You're going to debate which one of these challenges was the main challenge, the most important challenge. And in order to do that, you are going to have to start with the one that's in the question, the threat posed by the nobility. But you're also going to have to talk about other challenges in order to compare to the threat posed by the nobility to, as I said, identify the main challenge. Now, you also need to identify the time period because, as we saw, you need to make sure you cover the whole time period. So this one, 1485 to 1509. Now, I'll give you a planning tool later that'll hopefully help you ensure you do that. But another thing to note here. So option 2, Stuarts in the Interregnum. To what extent was religion mainly responsible for the challenges facing James I during his reign, 1603 to 1625? So first thing, highlight time period. Second, take a second now, take 30 seconds now to think what could be the factor in the question. What's the thing, one of many things that you'll discuss, and what is the key concept, the debate that you'll focus around. Well, I can tell you that religion is the factor in the question. It is one of a number of things that you are going to discuss to debate the key concept, which is what was mainly responsible for challenges facing James I. So religion was one of many challenges facing James. But there were other challenges, and your job throughout your essay is to debate whether or not religion or one of these other challenges was mainly responsible for those challenges. Next one, option 3, Wales and England, 1780 to 1880. How far do you agree that the defects of the electoral system, were mainly responsible for the demands for parliamentary reform in the period from 1793 to 1832? So again, our time period, 1793 to 1832. And I'll pause for a second for you to identify the factor and the key concept. Okay, that key concept then, defects of the electoral system. Sorry, the factor, defects in the electoral system. This is one thing that you are going to have to discuss amongst others, of which was the main thing. Oh, sorry, I just lost all that, haven't I? What's happened there? Here we go. This is one of many things that were mainly responsible for demands for parliamentary reform. So you will discuss throughout what is mainly responsible for parliamentary reform, what is mainly responsible, for the demands of parliamentary reform. And one of those things is a defective electoral system. Other things will also be there, and so you'll need to discuss those other things as well. Next one, option 4, England and Wales, 1880 to 1980. War was the most important influence on the changing role and status of women in Wales and England between 1914 and 1980. There's your time period. Your factor was war. War was one of many things that our debate, or our key concept in debate, most important influence on the changing role and status of women. War is one thing that changed the role and status of women, but was it the most important thing, or what other things could it have been? You'll have to discuss war. It's the one that's in the question. You have to discuss it first, but you can discuss other things. What other things had the most important influence on the changing role and status of women? Sorry, what other things had an important influence? And then you're debating which one had the most important. So here we go, right? We can kind of see that there. Same thing then, right? Next one's option 5, political and religious change in Europe. How successful was Charles V in dealing with the challenges he faced between 1516 and 1556? So our date range, 1516 to 1556. Our factor, how successful was Charles V in dealing with challenges? Our key concept, how successful was he dealing with challenges he faced? So Charles V is what you're going to discuss, but you're going to be debating how successfully was he or not. Our next question. Europe, 1682 to 1815. To what extent was the growth of the bourgeoisie the main challenge facing Louis XV during his reign, 1715 to 1774? There's your time period. Your factor in the question is the growth of the bourgeoisie, and your debate is main challenge facing Louis during his reign. Because one of the many challenges was the growth of the bourgeoisie, but was it the main challenge, or were one of the other challenges more important? Next, option 7, revolution in new ideas. How far was the growth of Prussia mainly responsible for the creation of the United Germany in the period 1815 to 1871? Our factor, the growth of Prussia. That's one of many things that might be responsible for the creation of United Germany. And so our debate, or our concept, mainly responsible for the creation of United Germany. So was growth of Prussia was the growth of Prussia mostly responsible, or was it something different? And option 8, it's not England and Wales, it's Europe in the age of conflict and cooperation. The lives of the people of Russia were most affected by repression than any government action in the period 1905 to 1945. Your time period, 1905 to 1945. Your key concept, repression. And your debate, your factor by repression, your key concept to lead to debate is people of Russia affected more. So repression is one of many government actions that happened in the period 1905 to 1945. But is it the one that had the most effect on the Russian people or not? There were other government actions that you'd be discussing and you'd be debating what had more of an impact. So there we go. Oh, sorry, there you go. We can see that there as well. So in order to ensure that you are completely focused, fully focused, as the exams marks team says, fully focused on the key concept, then you need to identify what that key concept is, don't you? Right? So whenever you get an exam question, sit down and identify those key concepts and the factor in the question. So how will these essays be worded? Well, they will always have similar question stems. It'll either be a statement and then discuss, or a to what extent, how far do you agree, how far was, or how successful. So they'll always be kind of phrased the same, but no matter really what there is, what it says, they're always going to ask you almost certainly to do the same sort of thing. They will always be on an issue that is stated on or closely linked to the specification. And it'll be phrased in a way that promotes a lively debate. Hence why they use those words like mainly or more, because it's making you debate it. Right, so if we just go back for a second to here, and we look at the last question, the lives of people of Russia were affected more by repression than by any other government action in the period 1905 to 1945. If we took out that word more, and the question then said, right, let's cross it out, and the question then said, the lives of the people of Russia were affected by repression as government action, in the period 1905 to 1945. It's not that really lively a debate, is it? You're just talking about how repression impacted people. But with that word more, you then have a lively debate. Did it affect people more or less than other things? The essay will cover a considerable period of time, right? You'll never have an essay which focuses on 2 years or even 5 years. It will probably be at least 10 years, right? So last time when I talked about it being a breadth study or a period study and not needing to know the information in as much depth as Unit 2, then that applies here. You won't have a question that's specifically about 1 year or 5 years or even, I would have thought, under 10 years. The essay will let you sustain an argument throughout the answer, right? So you can pursue that argument from the very beginning. We'll look at that in a minute. The essay should let learners show accurate understanding of the relevant historical concept in the question. And essay titles will include a key judgment word or words which allow learners to form a balanced judgment. To what extent were economic challenges the most serious problem facing Germany in the period 1918 to 1945? This has come from the example. This is what they're saying their exams will do. And for this last section, right, those key words, right, those key judgment words across all option exams in 2019 and 2018 were the following: mainly, more, greatest, or how successful, how effective, how far, or most important, significant, or effective. Was economic challenges the most effective or the most significant? You know, you just kind of replace the word a little bit. But by using those words, they're asking you to make a judgment and to debate. So in that case, what you can do is actually you can make your own question in your head. Because what you can do is you can pick a question stem, right? Either a phrase and then discuss, or to what extent, how far do you agree? How far do you agree even? Pick a specific content piece from your specification for a factor. Pick a judgment word, right? Mainly, more, greatest, or how effective. Pick a specific content piece from your specification for a debate. And then pick a time frame for your topic. Add 30 marks, bada bing, bada boo, you've got it. Example: to what extent did Mussolini mainly cause a political change in Italy 1922 to 1945? Or how far was Wolsey the cause of government reform in the period 1485 to 1603? Now, these aren't questions from the exam board at all. These are questions that I've made up, but I've done it using the kind of pointers in front of me here. And actually, you know, they sound a bit similar to what the exam board might ask. Yeah, they'd be a bit more polished, but nonetheless, there isn't a kind of an endless supply of essay questions from the exam board. So create some of your own, and more likely then that one of those might pop up in the actual exam. So there we go. That is how you are fully focused on the exact key concept in the question. So moving forward then, how do you ensure you cover the whole time period and those main developments? Well, that really comes in your planning stage. And what I suggest you do as a planning task is this RAG rating. So to start your planning process, I recommend you RAG rate the content that's related to the question you're answering, using 3 colors then: red, amber, green. Red, features that have little relevance to the inquiry. Amber, things that have got some relevance and you discuss if you've got time. And green, the ones that you think are the main developments and so are directly relevant to the inquiry and things you've got to discuss. You've got to put in that essay. So this is what I do, right? Now, this is not necessarily something you have time to do in the exam, right? Or maybe in a shortened form, but it's definitely something you'd be doing in your head by the time you got to the exam, particularly after practicing it maybe in doing extra exam questions between now and when you do the exam. So this question here: the lives of people of Russia affected more by repression than by any other government action in the period 1905 to 1945 discuss. What I need to do initially is I need to split this up into time periods. How do I make sure I cover 1905 to 1945? Well, the distinct time periods are the Tsar's government, then the dual power government of 1917, then Bolshevism under Lenin, before Bolshevism under Stalin. So in order to make sure I'm covering the whole time period, I need to make sure I cover something from each of those time periods. Each of those time periods have got government actions, and I need to make sure that I discuss one of those government actions. So these are the government actions that occurred during that time. And so from that then, I could begin my RAG rating. So all of these are government actions, right? It's government actions, isn't it, that need to be looked at. So as each of them are government actions, then now I need to think about which one would have had most of an effect on the people of Russia. So I would definitely have said Stalin's repression and reform. I'd have definitely said entry into World War I. I'd have definitely said the exile of Lenin. 100% would have said the new economic policy, collectivization and industrialization for sure, and mass terror and the gulags. So they are things that I definitely be discussing. Now, repression comes into repression and reform here, comes into mass terror here. So those are things that I could use in my first few paragraphs when I'm looking specifically at repression. After those paragraphs then, I need to compare, was that repression more or less of an impact on the Russian people than entry into World War I, exile Lenin, new economic policy? Now, I might also think, right, in my planning stage, right, that purge of the army and the Bolshevik Party, well, I don't think it's got that big of an impact. I don't think it's that important, because it affects a very small number of people. So I'm not even going to bother talking about that. Dealing with the failed coups, right? Yeah, it's a government action, but it doesn't really have that big of an impact on ordinary people because the coup failed. So I'm not going to bother discussing that. Right? Same with Bloody Sunday. It didn't really achieve anything, maybe. So I'm definitely not going to discuss that. Amber, well, these are ones, say Lenin's Testament, Last Testament. Well, these are ones that, if I've got time, I'm going to add in. They're not the main developments maybe, but if I've got time, then I'm going to add them in. That is how you are sure you cover the whole of a set period, right? And you focus on those main developments. By splitting up, by being clear what time periods are in the overall time period, and making sure you're covering a policy, or not necessarily a policy, but an aspect from each of those times. That way you can make sure you're focused on the whole set period and the main developments as well. So next then, right, kind of a clear and convincing debate. How do we ensure we've got a clear and convincing debate? Well, when you're writing your essay, you can almost do it as if you're justifying your RAG rating decisions, right? Why you said that is a main development, why that is something that had more of an impact on the lives of people of Russia, for example. So to do this, you will develop a difference between assertion and argument. So assertion is a statement or opinion which is not supported by a reason or further detail, whilst an argument is an assertion justified with reason or further detail which explains or justifies something and counters other arguments. So it means you're given specific pieces of evidence to back up that assertion. You are then understanding it in the context of the other arguments that you've made throughout your essay. So in order to help move from assertion to argument, right, read the example questions below and then add some support to each of the assertions to turn into an argument. So for example, if we had a question, the main problem faced by France in the period 1848 to 1871 was in foreign affairs, discuss. We could make some various assertions. We can make assertion that France had many problems in foreign policy in this period which outweighed other problems. That's an assertion, isn't it? I've made a statement or opinion, but I haven't supported it with further detail. So in order to make it an argument, I need to provide support. I need to provide direct evidence, maybe specific foreign policies, maybe specific outcomes of those foreign policies. Another example of an assertion could be, another issue to consider is that the main problem faced by France was connected with the personality of Napoleon III. That's an assertion. I've not given any evidence, not said what those problems were, and I've not said what elements of Napoleon's personality was a problem. That's what I need to do in the argument. I need to say why that is a problem. Same again, another assertion could be, it can be argued that France's real problems were more long-term and connected with the impact of industrialization on French society. That again is an assertion. It's a statement or opinion, not supported by reason, not supported by detail, not compared to anything else I've said. My argument is to provide support for that assertion. Evidence. Maybe compare it, or preferably compare it also to the others. Why is that an important statement to make? And that is absolutely the key. If you are making assertions, if you are just making unsupported opinions or statements, then that is not going to be a debate, and that's not going to be an essay that's going to get you any higher than probably 12 marks. So for a debate to occur, you also need to analyze, right? And analyzing is looking at something from more than one perspective or point of view. And these phrases, on the one hand, however, on the other hand, can help you with that analysis. But things that you can look out for in order to analyze are things like time, short-term and long-term. Something can have a big impact in the short term, but minimal impact in the long term. Or the other way around, something can have massive impact in the short term, but no impact at all in the long term. And that is then you analysing, and that creates a debate. As you then say why it was more important in the short term or less important in the long term, you are debating and you are analysing. That's exactly what the examiners want to see. Could also look at perspective, okay? Political, economic, social, individual effects, right? Something, a government action may affect people politically, or it may affect them more economically. And so it's a kind of a point of debate as well, isn't it, right? Is that economic impact more or less important than that social impact? And then obviously there's extent as well. Did it have a big impact, or did it have a very, very small impact? Again, it becomes an analysing point. This had a big impact. This about it had a small impact, and that can feed into your debate, using those phrases. On the one hand, this element had a small impact on people. However, if we look in the longer term, it had a much larger impact on the people because of this, this, and this. So in your arguments, as well as including specific evidence, if you also analyse the points too, you will have developed a convincing debate. And that's the key, convincing debate. So hopefully that's given you some pointers then on how to make a convincing debate. Next then, how do you reach a substantiated judgment? Now, to substantiate something, you need to provide evidence, and that is cold, hard facts. So unsubstantiated could be this. The lives of people of Russia were affected most by repression, as it was commonplace in Russia. Now that is an unsubstantiated assertion. It's a statement without any evidence to back it up. My substantiated would be the lives of the people of Russia were affected most by repression as the Red Terror, modelled on the terror in France, sought to eliminate all political opposition. This saw a total of 100,000 executions throughout the Civil War, 1917 to 1922. By giving some cold, hard facts, I have substantiated, I have evidenced my conclusion or my judgment. So hopefully that's given you some tips on that. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a second in terms of following it through from the beginning. But lucid, fully coherent, what does that mean? Well, this is something that can't really be taught. And it comes through flair, practice, excellent grammar and vocabulary, being able to express yourself. And the best way to do that is just to practice, practice. Do another essay, get it to your lecturer or your teacher to mark. Do another essay, get it to your lecturer or teacher to mark. Plan different essays, and with that, you'll pick up that flair. That practice will give you that flair, give you that lucidity, that coherency. And so hopefully that's shown you how to tap into those top scale marks on the mark scheme. Now, another way to ensure that your inclusion is your judgment is substantiated and included or integrated throughout is to start it with your introduction, to write an answer in a nutshell. So your answer in a nutshell was something that states overall what will be your argument. It is absolutely not a whodunit. I do not want to know at the end who the murderer was, right? I want to know right at the beginning, and I want to know where you're going and how you're going to prove that they were the murderer, if that was what we were thinking about, right? You're not writing a best-selling Miss Marple or another series of Line of Duty, right? I want to know right from the beginning. Briefly define the key terms. What do we mean? And don't waste time with a long introduction. Time wasted on a long introduction is poor because you're not debating an introduction, you're not analysing an introduction, you're not making a judgment introduction if you're just setting out what it is you're going to do. So if this was a question, to what extent were economic challenges the most serious problem facing Germany in the period 1918 to 1945, what a good one looks like for an introduction would be this. There is no doubt that economic challenges facing Germany were great between 1918 and 1945, as they often created a sense of insecurity. Without the perception of a stable economy, ordinary Germans had no interest in the success of government. However, this was a symptom of the most serious problem facing Germany, the instability of successive governments. So you can see throughout, I'm going to follow this argument that it was the instability of successive governments that was the real, most serious problem facing Germany in that period, and it wasn't economic challenges. And I've also said, right, really, that what I'm talking about problems facing Germany, I'm defining as stability, right? Stable stability. So when I'm talking about problem is stability. Now you might define problem as something different, right? You might say problem is about instead standard of living. It's fine. That's what you would do, but set out what it is you're defining it as. Second example could be this, right? If we were going back to that same question, the lives of the people of Russia were affected more by repression than any other government action, 1905 to 1945. What a good one looks like would be this. The governments of Tsar Nicholas, Lenin, and Stalin used violence as a very basis of government, inheriting the idea of repression from each other and as part of a cultural tradition. Although economic policies by governments such as Stolypin's agricultural reforms and Stalin's collectivization had major impacts on people's lives, the actions were enforced by repression to prevent the dissent, and so this had an overriding effect. Despite repression being directed at a few people, the impact was great and it sent a wider message to the masses. So I'm saying that repression had the biggest impact, right? It had the biggest impact. I'm also saying that repression is the use of violence. I'm defining what I mean by repression, the use of violence. So short and sweet, right? I've not wasted 10 minutes writing it. I've wasted, well, not wasted if it's an answer in a nutshell. I've spent 5 minutes writing it, maybe, because obviously I've got to think what my argument's going to be, and I've got to make sure I've defined in my head what those key terms are in order then to be able to fully debate it and discuss it throughout the essay. But I'm not spending 10 minutes. I'm spending 5 at most on my introduction, because your answer in a nutshell is what you need. Just imagine, right, almost the question had 3 marks after it rather than 30 marks after it. And so you've also got, right, some good kind of planning, document planning task is also doing this, right? Putting a question in the middle, and then below, to the left, period coverage. So things that, breaking it down to that time period. Above to the left, key features. So maybe some of those key developments that you know of straight away, you've got to make sure you cover. And then you've got on the right evidence to support the proposition and evidence to enter into a debate about the proposition, including an evaluation of the significance. So evidence to support the proposition is evidence in this case to support the idea that the main cause of conflict was the issue of divine right. Evidence to enter into a debate about the proposition is stuff that suggests divine right was not the main cause of conflict. And then you are, as you're discussing those two, you're debating back and forth, you are creating that debate. So another example here, right, could be how far do you agree that the Locarno Treaty was the most successful international agreement in the period between 1919 and 1938. So your period coverage, you're making sure you're covering all that period, 1919 to 38. So that might be post-war peace settlements, then Locarno spirit, then appeasement. Key features, key things you think you've definitely got to include, those main developments. Then evidence to support the proposition that Locarno was the most successful. Evidence evidence to enter into debate about the proposition, stuff that suggests Locarno was not the most successful international agreement. And this then is how you'd be able to almost structure your essay, okay? It allows you to identify points to debate, and then you can structure your essay like this, right? On the one hand, Locarno was the most important because of this, this, and this. On the other hand, it wasn't the most important because of this, this, and this. Additionally, Locarno was the most successful because of this, this, and this. However, this was probably more successful than Locarno because of this, this, and this. Moreover, Locarno showed great potential with this, this, and this, and then your conclusion. And so you are creating a debate, right? Just imagine you're having a discussion with your friends. If you had a discussion with your friends and, I don't know, is chocolate the best food in the world? And you put forward your point of view that chocolate was the best food in the world. And your friend said, well, chocolate isn't the best food in the world because of this. and then you shook hands and walked off, that wasn't a debate. That was just you stating your opinions. But if you said chocolate was the best food in the world because of this, they said chocolate wasn't because of this, then you say, well, I understand what you said there, but it's still the best because of this. And then they said, well, yeah, I get that, but it definitely isn't the best because of this, this, and this. And then you conclude that is more of a debate, isn't it? That is what they're looking for. They are looking for that debate, that discussion, back and forth, back and forth. Same here, right? Evidence to enter into proposition, into debate about it. Well, you can start that with your on the other hand, howevers, right? Almost start your paragraphs with it. On the other hand, what about this? However, what about this? So that brings us to the very end of our session on essay writing skills and developing reasoned arguments. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's helped you a little bit think through how to write an essay. It has been interesting for me to sit here and do this over the last few weeks, and I hope you found it useful. That'd be the main thing. All it leaves me to say really is thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining over those last 4 weeks, as I've shared some tips on how to succeed at History AS level, and I wish you all the very, very best in your exams and onto Year 13 as well. I will just pause for a few minutes now and see if there are any questions. I'll also give it a bit of time. I'll pause for a bit of time to see if anyone's got any questions to add as well. So feel free to add any questions and I'll do my best to answer them if you've got any. Okay, it doesn't look like any questions are coming in. So in that case, again, a massive thank you and all the very, very best of luck with these exams. Actually, I apologize, it's not luck. I very specifically didn't use the word luck earlier because it's not luck. It's skill, it is taking time, it's practice. So all the very best. Thank you very much for joining and yeah, all the very best. Ta-ra.